Hi, Yvette. We saw your hand raised. I'm guessing it was just to make sure that you were going to get speaking and video privileges, but let us know. Okay, great. Yep. Michelle's working on it. She had to get the YouTube stream up as well.
Okay.
Okay, and I do see James. If you could select, you should have a prompt asking you if you'd like to be promoted to a panelist. If you could please select that for me. Perfect. And then as I promote you to panelists, if you could please change your names to reflect your first and last names for me, that would be very much appreciated.
Michelle?
Yes.
Well, I have to leave early. That's why I neglected to accept the a panelist, because I assume that would be at the end of the program. I have to leave at 7.
Okay. Well, if you would like to stay on and participate until then, that's totally fine. If you would like me to switch you back to an attendee where you can just listen, I can do that as well. You just let me know your preference.
Oh, okay. Let me be an attendee then.
Okay, great. I'll put you back down.
Thank you.
Of course.
We'll get into discussion pretty early in tonight's program. So we'd like to give most of the time tonight to be able to hear from CAC members, if that impacts your decision at all.
Yeah, I would encourage you to stay. And you could always leave regardless at the time that you need to.
James, did that change your mind at all? Would you like to stay on?
As a panelist, we're saying.
As a panelist?
Oh, sure. As long I'd be happy to do, to help in any way I could. I'm just saying that I'll have to leave early.
That's fine. James, the issue is that as a panelist, you're able to chime in more. You're able to actually verbalize as we go through the discussion.
Okay.
Not as a general member of the public. So folks, we'll get started in just a few minutes. We're waiting just on all the logistics here to get everybody up to speed. I'll remind everybody, if you could please change your screen name to your first and last name so that we can sort of take roll. And even as we go through, it helps us just to understand who's here and call on you directly.
So a little technical assistance on how to do that.
Sure.
I don't know how to do that.
Sure. So if you hover over your name, Lee, in your screen area on the top right of your box, 3 little dots pop up.
Yeah, I see those.
Okay, so click on those, and it should say change name.
I see mute my audio, start video.
And then at the bottom, it should say rename.
Rename. Okay. All righty.
The Zoom world. There you go.
Okay.
There you go. You got it, D.
Now, while I got you,
Uh-huh.
how do I get this big ad off my screen?
You mean you got like an ad blocker?
I've got City of Santa Rosa advertising everything from Fountain Grove to, downtown or whatever. So how do I get that off?
Oh, well, that might be Santa Rosa Forward. That's just our.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so that's just the PowerPoint. We're gonna work through that a little bit.
Oh, okay. So I'll just.
But if you want to see others, if you want to see the gallery view, is I think what you might be.
Yeah, I like to kind of see the gallery view. So where do I go to view?
Okay, you're right. Go to view options or view on the top right. And you could select the one that says side by side.
I hit the wrong thing. I exited all you guys out.
No, so just go back and do side by side gallery.
Side by side mode. Okay, I see Noe and Andrea. Those are the only two people I see.
So then if you hover between the the big Santa Rosa ad, like you said.
Oh, there's full screen.
Yeah. So if you hover between the two, between the
okay,
the folks and the screen, right?
You are viewing Dan and Amston MIG screen, it says.
Right. And so then you can kind of toggle and make the screen larger or the gallery larger. There's kind of a little line that divides the two, the gallery and the Dan screen.
Okay, so on the left, in the upper left, it says live on custom live streaming service.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle, you are viewing Dan Amston and MIG's screen, and then further to the right, view options.
Uh-huh.
So do I want to go in and view the options and exit full screen or follow presenter's pointer or?
I think you should be in side-by-side mode. Try that one.
Okay, I just did that and I've got about 8 or 9 people.
There you go.
Right.
There you go.
Okay.
That's what you want.
All right. So how do I get rid of this other stuff on the left?
Well, you can't yet.
Okay.
That one, Dan controls. He's sharing his screen, and we're going to go through a PowerPoint, and we want you to see that.
Oh, I can get rid of it. I put my clipboard over. No.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Sorry for the.
No. Hey, this is what it's about. We want to make sure everybody is comfortable and able to participate. So, Michelle, are we ready to get going?
We are. If everybody, if our committee members would please turn on your cameras now, and then we can start and do roll call.
So I don't see my picture. I see everybody else.
Oh, so the same buttons on the right.
Start my video camera.
There you go.
There you go. And it's still nothing there.
Yeah, we see something. It's, I think the video camera is pointed at.
Oh, I know what it is. It's my.
There you are. There you go.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. I'll send you my invoice later, Lee, for, technical assistance.
Yeah, right. Okay. I'll send it right back to you.
Appreciate it. Okay, Michelle, are we ready?
We are. And if we could stop sharing or stop screen share for just a moment while we do roll call, just so I can have a visual on everyone. Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to just do a roll call real quick. Ellie Soto. Okay. Andreas Vigil. Annette Arnold.
Here.
Thank you. DeLachey Benson. DeLachey, I see your name up on the screen.
Sorry, I was muted.
That's okay, thank you. Erica Mikish. Okay. Yvette Minor.
Here.
Thank you. Jen Close.
Here.
Lee Pierce.
Here.
Lisa Jocelyn. Melanie Ehlers.
Here.
Michael Cook. Michael.
I'm sorry, here.
Thank you. Omar Lopez.
Here.
Patricia Thompson. Rajuda Bomik.
Here.
Ryan Tracy.
Here.
Stephanie Maneri. Stephen Spillman.
Here.
Kevin Anderson.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Michelle Spilvetta. Sorry, I killed that your last name. No? Okay. James Pettigrew.
Here,
Perfect. Joel Batterman.
Here.
Anna Stevens. And Annie Barber.
Yes. Here.
Thank you. Okay, let the record reflect that all committee members are present with the exception of Ali Soto, Andreas Vigil, Erica Mikish, Lisa Jocelyn, Patricia Thompson, Stephanie Maneri, Michelle Spilvita, and Anna Stevens.
And Michelle, can you note how close we are to quorum in case some people have to leave early?
Of course. Actually, it looks like Erica has just joined us as well. So we are, I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 16. So we will have a quorum even with James needing to leave a little early.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah. Okay, so just really quick, I would like to start the meeting by reading this to you all. The city of Santa Rosa is committed to creating a safe and inclusive environment free from disruption. We will not tolerate any hateful speech or actions and are well staffed to monitor that everyone is participating respectfully or they will be removed. If necessary, we will also immediately end the meeting. If the meeting is ended, we will plan on recording another presentation without participants that will be posted on the project website.
Great. Thank you for that, Michelle. Welcome, everybody. I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Noé Noyola. I'll be here to help you through the evening, help the conversation along, really time keep and make sure that we all get a chance to speak. Before we get into further discussion, just wanted to do a very quick announcement to see if there's any translation needed. Buenas tardes a todos los que están aquí presentes. Tan solo quería dar una pausa para ver si alguien requiere algo de traducción. ¿Alguien requiere traducción al español? Por favor, indíquenos por el chat o por cualquier otra manera que sea posible. ¿Es necesario que alguien necesite interpretación? I see Delashay. Do you need interpreter? Did you have a question?
I was just wondering if you could do closed caption.
Oh, good question. Michelle, do we have the closed caption? You should be able to turn that on.
Yes, let me turn it on.
Okay.
It looks like we don't have anyone that we can assign. And it looks like we don't have that service set up for this webinar.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you for that, Delashay. We will have it in the next one, though.
And just a quick note, the YouTube stream does have closed captioning on there. YouTube does a closed captioning, if that's helpful at all.
Great, thank you. Okay, so getting through the logistics here, now let's go ahead and move on. The agenda for today, we have approximately 2 hours, a little bit less than that to get through the evening. We did the call to order roll call, giving you a bit of a welcome, did all the logistics. We do want to update you on the team updates, what we've been at work since we met last month, and just provide some reports, some updates on what's going on. The main scheduled item here is to continue the discussion that we started really last year in 2021, December, and continue that discussion because I think it really merited that need. We want to go through the alternatives. You've all had, I think, a chance to review. We've made some changes and we want to go through some of that. So review the approach, the alternatives workbook, get into a little bit again of the equity priority analysis that we started to talk about, and then talk about the community engagement events that throughout all this, we're going to devote most of the scheduled time to discussion. I think that was the impetus. We heard loud and clear the feedback from you all, and we want to be able to accommodate that and make sure that that your thoughts are recorded. And then finally, hopefully we will be able to finish by 8 p.m. Sound good? All right. So let's keep going. The project team, again, you all have met most of us, city staff, and the MIG and Placeworks team will be here. So I don't think that we need to go over this. CAC members, you've all announced your participation, announced your presence here. So we're clear on that. Again, I want to just remind everybody or whoever might not yet be, I think just make sure you put your first name and your last name just so that we're clear and the record is clear on who's speaking, and also just it helps us to be able to call on you. Also, if you can, as a courtesy, we also appreciate if you do come on camera when you're, at least when you're speaking. All right, thank you. Finally, just your role. I think just as a reminder, your role is crucial to this process. We want to thank you for being a part of it. You are really our liaisons to the community engagement. And so we want to be able to have you really provide us with that guidance and the input that we need to be sure to have the voice of the community heard out in the general plan process. So thank you so much again for participating. If I haven't said enough, I think on behalf of the city, on behalf of everyone, really appreciate your time and commitment to the city. Okay, so the goals for today's discussion, let's just get through it really quickly and get into the presentation. We just want to hear your feedback. We want to hear your thoughts, your reactions, and your feedback to the alternatives. So again, this is just one piece of it. We will have several iterations. We've had earlier discussions on it, so we're going to continue that. We do have a series of questions. We do want to be able to have a back and forth. So if you can ask us questions, formulate your thoughts, and just really what we're really after here is a discussion with you. If we can answer the questions, then we will. And if not, we will note them and investigate them, or at least research them for you for future discussion. Finally, we are about to get into our next set of community engagement activities, and we do need your help. We want to just get your thoughts and feedback on what that process looks like, and then finally, what your role in that process for community engagement might be. I want you to start thinking about, well, just what that's going to look like, what engagement opportunities might be available, how you might be able to fit into those, what help you need, how the materials might help you to be able to get out into the community if you feel comfortable. So we do want to be able to confirm that you're clear on this and that you're part of this kind of ground truthing, if you will, of the process for us. All right, so I'll pass it over to Dan to give us some project team updates and reports.
Sounds good. Thanks, Noe, and good evening, everyone. Dan Amson with MIG. Like Noe, one of the project consultants working with staff on the general plan update that we know as Santa Rosa Forward. So a few things on just where we are in the process and some updates from our last discussion. We are really in the midst of the alternatives phase of this general plan project. And really what that means is based on the community's vision, analysis, existing conditions information, other discussions and surveys we've had over about the last 12 months or so, we're really starting to get into some policy choices around how and where the city can grow. And as we discussed at our last meeting about a month ago, and I'll talk a little bit more about in this short presentation, really thinking about what some of the benefits or trade-offs are around some of these growth alternatives. But really important for tonight's discussion is we're going to be launching into the alternatives community discussion here pretty soon in February and March. And this is envisioned as a very robust process with a lot of opportunities for community discussions and feedback and reactions to the alternatives, which will help inform the remaining part of the general plan update process. Another update, actually, since our last meeting and really kind of earlier this month, the team has made a lot of updates to the project website as well. So CAC members haven't visited in a while, or if community members who are watching us tonight haven't visited in a while, I do encourage you to take a look. We have some new videos, some new information, some engagement metrics, and other documents and materials. And we're going to continue to update the website throughout the project. But there's a new feature that's a contact us button where anyone in the community can write comments or questions to the project team. So we're trying to have this as interactive as we can, but just another portal or method for the community to stay engaged. So one of the things I wanted to talk about just kind of briefly, but following up from our discussion at the last CAC meeting, is really this alternatives process. So this is a simplified graphic just showing from the top to the bottom the overall schedule for Santa Rosa Forward or the general plan update process. So we started this process back in the summer of 2020 and through the fall of 2020, we really discussed how best to engage the community. Obviously, the pandemic was starting. So we had a lot of discussions around strategies and different methods for engaging the community, but also a robust existing conditions analysis was prepared, a visioning engagement event set that had many meetings, over 25 meetings, 10 community workshops. We're now in this alternatives phase, essentially, or land use and circulation alternatives. And one of the things responding really to CAC member feedback is we created sort of this more simplified graphic on some of the milestones. But where we are right now is sort of with this alternatives workbook, which is presenting the alternatives, presenting some of the findings or the analysis around it. And as Noah and I mentioned, the next step is to really get into this community discussions. And that's why we really want to get ideas and feedback from CAC members on the workbook and the alternatives themselves so we can really launch into this robust round of engagement here over the next few months. So the goals for this round of engagement, and I'll go this pretty briefly because we talked about it the last meeting, but we want to reach a lot of the community and really get out as much as we can digitally and hopefully physically as well, as assuming we can do it with COVID protocols in place, but have a range of different in-person and virtual events. Some people are fine engaging through surveys online, others really need to be engaged one-on-one where they meet or shop. So we want to have a lot of flexibility in how we are going out and reaching the community. And also, is it a short event? Is it a long event? Is it a quick survey? Is it a discussion? But the goal is to solicit community feedback on these alternatives and really get the community starting to think about changes or different options for the city over the next 5, 10, 20 years as we go forward. And this really comes down to policy choices, how and where to grow and why. And so that's the discussion we really want to launch off with all of you, but also the community as well, leading to informing a preferred alternative. So as we get hopefully a wealth of community feedback and reactions over the next few months, another engagement event set probably over the summer to then further refine a preferred alternative before we get into actual policies and drafting a general plan. So one of the things we talked about a little bit last time is sort of the CAC members' roles or activities during this engagement event set. So at one level, we really want your help to get the word out. As liaisons to the community, The city and the project team are going to do a lot of notifications and announcements, but we can provide materials, email blast language, or others collateral that you can use to really help get the word out as we launch in this engagement event set. Also attending meetings, attending the workshops, pop-ups, equity priority area meetings, holding meetings using the toolkit. So we're in the process of producing the survey tool and the toolkit, but we're going to have training sessions next month with CAC members to really have an opportunity for you all to help us reach out to the community. And you won't be doing it alone. We're here to support and to help as well. But again, in that liaison role, it's getting the word out, but also helping us hear and gather input from the community and also participate as well. You're all residents and community members, so we want all CAC members really to participate in this process. So real quick, and again, this is building on our discussion from the last CAC meeting, but we got a lot of feedback, a lot of questions, a lot of comments, some concerns as well. And we've spent the last 4 or 5 weeks or so as a team going back and revising the alternatives workbook based on a lot of the comments that we heard from all of you at the last meeting. And we have a new workbook that is published that includes some more information or some clarifications about the alternatives. And I want to just really highlight the sort of major changes to the workbook in particular. An updated and simplified project schedule, which actually I just showed, but really important feedback of just trying to be or trying to convey more simply what the project schedule is, but also where we are in the process and how community comments on the alternatives are going to help inform the Santa Rosa forward process. We also added in more existing conditions information and really more of the findings that came out of that work from last summer, last fall, which really are sort of a foundational piece, or one of the foundational pieces of the alternatives themselves. So we want to have that information in there to hopefully explain and make it clearer on how the alternatives were formed. We talked quite a bit in our last session about equity and ways of addressing equity, but also conveying current inequities as well. So we included a new equity in Santa Rosa section up front. It's essentially more detailed information on existing conditions, but specifically around equity and equity priority communities and populations. We added in the full vision statement. I think the last draft we had just sort of the quick summary, but I felt it'd be good to really highlight the full community vision statement in the alternatives workbook itself. And then we added more information and more detail on how the alternatives were developed and some of the metrics. There's a few numbers, but also just some of the qualitative analysis and other factors that went into the development of the alternatives. And a new equity and alternatives section. So this is really looking at a comparative analysis of how each alternative relates to equity, but also taking it a bit further. I think we had this part of our discussion at the last session. Equity is more than just these land uses or where things go. It's really policies around focusing improvements or changes also. So we want to include that as a key piece. And then throughout the workbook, there were some prompting questions. And we made some changes, made some clarifications, and really tried to sort of frame better maybe the purpose of the alternatives as we go through this. And then lastly, on the last page of the workbook, additional information. So as community members are reading the workbook, if they want information, additional detail, technical appendices, there's now links to all of that at the end. So again, thanks for the feedback at our last session. I think this has really helped to create a document that should make it much easier for community members to understand sort of how the alternatives were phrased, and also the type of feedback that'd be helpful, and reactions and methods for reacting to the alternatives, which again, as Noe mentioned, that's a key role of the CAC, is really helping us take this message out to the community as well. So for the alternatives themselves, they are still largely the same from the last round because they're building off of the same assumptions. We just added more information about them. But central corridors, and I'll go through this pretty quick so we want to get into discussion, but the central corridors is really focusing new housing growth and new changes in job growth around downtown or the major corridors that have a lot of transit connections, transit activities. Main Streets is looking more creating these nodes or pockets of shopping or neighborhood commercial centers. So there's a lot more services and commercial, closer walking distance to most neighborhoods. And Alternative 3 really looks at what are all the possibilities for housing on available areas and sites. And again, the sort of the constraint or the thing that binds all these together is looking at similar housing growth in all three alternatives. It's really about policy options around where that growth can go or change. And another thing we want to just report back on a little bit as well is some updates on the equity priority populations that are both part of the report, but also analysis that's going on right now. And I'll pass it to Beatrice real quick, because I think she has a few updates on that process.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for providing us input through the survey that we submitted. We heard loud and clear that you want us to include different groups and different layers of information in Santa Rosa's equity priority populations. What I want to tell you is that this is a work in progress, and we're trying to get the data sets to be able to map all these populations that you asked us to include. It's not as easy, specifically when it comes to people with mental health diseases or issues. That is a really hard data set to track in geographical systems. But we heard the part about affordable housing, and we're working on that. And we heard the part about homeless encampments and shelters, and we are already working on that. So we will have those sets of information updated as soon as we are able to figure out what's the best way. In terms of the homeless encampments, we know this is a type of population that usually changes locations pretty quick. So we're trying to figure out how we can coordinate to have the most updated data set. And that's the only, those are the only updates that we have. And that's the map that we showed last time. We just wanted to bring it back to your view so you can remember what we were talking about. And I see Yvette's hand up, but I don't know if we are just about to start the public comment, Dan, about this. I will leave this to you before I give Yvette the word, because I know we have a different system today going on.
Well, thank you, Beatrice, and Yvette and Annette as well. This actually gets to our pause points. So it's perfect timing. We wanted to just do a quick update presentation. I did want to just add one thing I forgot to mention earlier. We're working with Beatrice to actually get a web page up and running on the website dedicated just to equity and the equity priority communities. So we're working on that content right now, but that's another website update that is going to take place here over the next few weeks or so. So we'll report back on that during the next CAC meeting. So with that, I do want to pass it back to Noe. We want to get the discussion going, and we have folks here to answer questions and take notes. And
perfect.
With that, I'll pass to Noe.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Beatrice, for that very quick update. I know you all have questions. We want to go first through a round robin, just go through, make sure that everybody gets a chance, get your feedback, and then we can get into a discussion. So I'm gonna just go down the line as how I see a couple of people raise their hands. So I see Annette. Annette, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I was going to ask if you could show the graphics a little bit larger, because it's hard to read any of the print on them.
Which graphic specifically,
like
Annette?
when you were showing the three alternatives.
Okay, so we can show those certainly. Yvette, go ahead. Oh, and well, hold on. Annette, did you have anything else, anything on non-logistical things that you wanted to, as we go?
Not at this point.
Okay, thank you. Yvette, go ahead, please.
My question was about the data sets. We have a couple of data sets that's going to be launched this week on Wednesday. And so I wanted to find out which is the portrait of Sonoma, and then we also have the scorecard. So for those data sets, is that something that's going to be used in the equity portion of this? Because there is a lot of key data in those data sets that would help with this process.
Great, thank you. And I think Beatrice is nodding her head, so I'm gonna just go ahead and go to Beatrice.
Thank you, Noe. Is this related to Sonoma Portrait, Yvette?
Yes, that, and then the scorecard is supposed to be coming out soon. I don't know the exact date for that.
Yeah, we'll definitely include information from Sonoma's portrait, and thank you for bringing it up. But thank you, Yvette.
Did you have any suggestions, Yvette? Anything that you wanted to propose?
No, I think once that data set comes out, that might be something we can bring back to the group for them to just take a look if they're not going to that launch. And then, oh, I forgot, there's one more, the Youth Truth Survey is another one that's going to be coming out soon.
Which one is the other one? Yvette?
Youth Truth Survey.
Youth Troop. Okay. Great. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Any other comments on the presentation, on the updated materials? Yvette? No?
I just like the adjustments that you made to the workbook, and if I have any other concerns, I know how to get a hold of you.
Okay. Right on. Thank you so much. Let's see, going down the line, Ryan, and I'm just going down the Brady Bunch line here, okay, folks? So I'm not even going in any order. Ryan, go ahead, please.
Hey, I appreciate the team and staff taking all the input from the last meeting. One thing I think I'm still kind of wrestling with is when I'm thinking about these alternatives is understanding a lot of the trade-offs. I think there's certainly a good graphic on that, thinking about like the hazards and understanding the different implications, different alternatives. But I imagine there's different economic trade-offs as well. I know one of the assumptions is there's the same housing and same amount of commercial activity between different ones, but my guess is that different alternatives probably are going to attract different levels of that, or there's going to be different risks from an economic perspective. So getting some insight into some of the other potential trade-offs between the different alternatives would be really helpful in engaging the community.
Ryan, what trade-offs are you thinking when you're saying trade-offs? What would that be? Is it the type of business? Is it where it's located? What are you thinking in terms of trade-offs? Help us understand that a little bit, please.
I'm thinking, I think it was written, I think, in one of the descriptions, like, for example, the more downtown concentrate alternative is more likely to attract like larger, corporate type activities versus, more distributed ones. So kind of making some more of the kind of thinking around that more visible to understand what the trade-offs are would be helpful. That's just one example.
Sure, more of the connections, more the implications of each type of scenario, if you will. Dan, do you have any thoughts, or Andrea? Go ahead, Andrea. Sorry.
I can jump in on that. Hi, it's Charlie from PlaceWorks. Part of the complication, Ryan, is COVID and what are brick and mortar patterns going to be like after COVID. So, the data we have is pre-COVID, and it basically says if you load things up downtown or on central corridors, you're going to be less likely to get those goods and services in your neighborhood. But I'm not sure that that's quite as true anymore as it was, because people's comfort level about going out tends to favor kind of more local, closer things in a kind of a cool way. Like, think about the world before the car in the 1910s, where everything was, walkable or very close by. But I think in general, I think the way to characterize the economic trade-offs are really about the travel patterns. So, industrial, big box, those kinds of opportunities, those are always going to be near the freeway, kind of in the places where we expect them now. The real difference economically between the corridor focused, say on one end, and the distributed housing on the other is what opportunity kind of the mom and pop scale, the brick and mortar, the local store is going to have. And the one complication in all three of those is how strong the retail market can remain for the formula retailers who aren't really kind of the vilified big box, but who provide services in neighborhoods. I'm thinking like Barnes and Noble in a small scale, shopping center. So I think there's no real set answer, but the real difference is, what do you need on a daily basis? What kinds of goods and services? How far are you willing to? Do you want to go and get them? And then what kind of scale will you be dealing with when you get there? So we all have our patterns of corner grocery for some things, bigger grocery store for others. For some of us, that could be the same distance. For others, it could be walking versus driving. But I think the real unknown here is for things that aren't daily needed goods and services, like books or like kitchenware or whatever, what's that pattern going to be like? And economists are a little bit shy right now of trying to say how that's going to work out. And the other side of that too is accommodations, right? So everyone wants a vacation right now, needs a vacation, but how comfortable are we all thinking about, where we're going to stay? And Santa Rosa is a destination, shouldn't be forgotten. There are tourists who want to come to Santa Rosa.
Absolutely.
So where hotel units, bed and breakfast go, those kinds of things are just somewhat unknown. I think the safe way to kind of characterize this to help you make a decision about what you want to see in the future is think of yourselves, and hopefully now coming out of COVID, what do you think is the right thing? Like, what do you think is the right fit for Santa Rosa? Do you think it's okay to kind of concentrate things in one area or not? Do you think they should be more distributed? Let that guide about how you travel and how you want to experience the circulation and transportation through town kind of guide you for the economics, because the economics is going to follow that. It's probably not going to lead it like it used to, or at least in the same ways.
Thanks, Charlie. So, Ryan, you're really getting at the suggestion of increasing a little bit more of that impact, a little bit more analysis. Is that right? You were trying to, for the community engagement.
Right. And, you know, I offer that example on the commercial side, but, you know, I think on the residential side as well, is, you know, is there a certain amount, is there a certain type of, you know, framework that attracts more development versus others that developers are asking for? You know, if we made everything single family housing, that might not what we want from like a sustainability and other, you know, other metrics, but is that going to be what is needed to really drive developers to start building housing units? You know, those sorts of things I think are hard for me to grasp when we're kind of making decisions. Yeah,
absolutely. Andrea, do you have a follow-up to this?
I was just going to suggest for one bit of additional detail, and I don't think, unfortunately, this touches on your housing example so much as economics, but if you do look at the technical appendix, starting on page 4 of that document that's linked from the project page, you can find a little bit more detail that teases out what is bulleted and summarized in the alternatives workbooks. That might help to get at a little bit more of what you're looking for.
Still, your note though, Ryan, about having this discussion, particularly when we go out into the community with folks that don't get to read the appendix, is going to be critical, right? I think that's what you're really getting at. Thank you for that, Ryan. So Melanie, go ahead, please. Melanie Ehlers, sorry.
Allers.
Allers. Oh, I knew it.
I missed our last meeting, so I'm definitely getting caught up, and I'm really loving the discussion it seems that you guys had last time. And I think what I'm really thinking about with thinking about these alternatives is sort of balancing what we talked about at meeting 2, the last meeting I was able to go to, and sort of balancing, you know, that vision of what we want for the city with these alternatives. And I know that the priorities that I'm thinking about are, you know, how to achieve equity and also achieve that vibrant city center that we all talked about, and more walking and biking options. But I think, like Charlie and Ryan have brought up, like the reality is too that our city is spread out right now. And so how do we sort of balance between each of these alternatives so that everyone in the community kind of gets what they need?
Great, thank you for that. And I'll pose a question to the project team here, just to clarify. When we say preferred alternative, we're not saying like, oh, it's either going to be A, B, or C, or is it? Or is it going to be a sort of a merger of the two? I don't know. Dan, Andrea, do you have give us a little bit of guidance on what's likely to result here?
Yeah, I think we're going to end up with something that looks like a combination of each of these 3 and some additional from all corners based on the input that we receive from folks. So these are really just starting points to get ideas flowing and give you a sense of what is possible with these initial parameters. And all of them are flexible, starting with that basic assumption about the 36,000 housing units. That in and of itself is flexible, and that impacts everything else. So, you know, this is all going to be based on ultimately what we hear from you all.
Great, thank you for that. Let's see, I had Melanie. Okay, Annie Barber, go ahead, please.
I'm just kind of wondering, so in the central area, how much growth can we absorb? And so part of what she kind of answers some of that is that it would be a combination. But are we talking about the central area kind of being redeveloped in some way to accommodate that much housing and business?
Right. So the question, I think, and you're breaking up a little bit there, Annie, but I think we got it. How much can we absorb in the central core, right, in the downtown area? And I think are you getting out at one of the first the alternative 1?
Yes.
Is that it? Okay. Yes. Go ahead, Andrea.
Yeah, so great question. Based on what is accommodated in the existing general plan based on the current land use today, about half of that 36,000 of those 36,000 units would go to the central corridors project focus area. And the remainder of those 36,000 units would go across the rest of the city in different patterns. So, and that's what we're looking at for the focus area for alternative 2 also, is approximately half of that going to the focus area and the rest distributed across the rest of the city. Both of these would be likely to have much of the economic development follow the focus areas.
Okay.
So,
And how would that affect, was just reading in the paper where they may force us to build more housing than what we have scheduled to do, or what we're looking at right now.
Well, something here.
I can reply to that. I think
Go ahead, Amy.
you're talking about the Press Democrat article on housing. I think it was in yesterday's paper.
Yes.
catch us up to speed, Amy, please. What does the article say?
Well, the article was pretty much providing a synopsis of the regional housing needs allocation and just how the state and the regional governments are giving numbers to our local jurisdictions on how much we have to plan for. And so that is a pretty complex process that just happened over the last year. And it's defining how many units and which type of housing we need to plan for in the next 8-year cycle. But it only asks us to plan for them. So that is part of our general plan update and our housing element update. And Andrea can get into a lot of specifics about how we get into that. And that might actually be a topic for another meeting because it's pretty meaty. But the newspaper article was talking about some of the other smaller cities and their challenges with it. And Santa Rosa, we actually are in a pretty good situation because of our recent efforts with the downtown specific plan and various other initiatives that we've been working on. But that is only for an 8-year cycle that we're being asked to plan for. So the housing element is on a more regular cycle. The general plan that we're looking at is going to 2050. So it'll include multiple cycles.
So
that's helpful.
So Amy, the RHNA, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, that is what the state asks us to basically plan for. It doesn't say build it, and that's why a lot of cities actually do, right? But but in this case, we're in good shape to meet that goal. Is that what you're confirming, Amy?
Yes, because we're looking at just the near future for that goal. But we are also looking at a larger number for our general plan as well.
And then one more quick caveat to that, Annie, is I think the major piece that Andrea mentioned is about the half and half, right? So if our current regional housing needs allocation for this cycle is carried forward for each of the 8-year cycles during this general plan period, and that's about 6,000 over 4 cycles, that's about 24,000 housing units. So if that's what gets built, and you look at something like concentrating it downtown, what would get built downtown would be half of that. It would be the 12 of the 24. So it's more about the relative placement or distribution of the housing than the total number. But the total number is also dependent on market demand, which is what Noe was mentioning. So typically in California, cities will get these regional housing needs allocations. And Noe he's a very polite guy. He said it's what the state requests, but they quote require it. It's required, but as both Noe and Amy said, it's required to be planned for. The city can't make people come in and build those units. There has to be a market there also. So we can do all the planning for all the housing we want to concentrate it wherever you guys think it's appropriate and the community thinks it's appropriate. That's not a guarantee that it will all get built.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That makes it pretty clear.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Annie. I think that's a very good question, though, that just understanding. I just want to take a very quick break and encourage everybody to please come on your video, to turn on your video. And it's only because we are on YouTube, we're YouTube stars here. So we do want to make sure that everybody sees who is present and of course the diversity of the group here. Dan, go ahead, and then we'll get into some more questions.
No, just one quick question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. Go ahead, please.
One interruption. Jim was raising his hand, and he was not given the opportunity to talk. And I'm sorry because I think now he left, but I just wanted to bring it up. I'm sorry.
I apologize for that. Okay, I should have.
Sorry about that.
Let's see if he comes back. We'll bring him on very quickly. Okay, Dan, go ahead.
Thank you, Beach, for mentioning that. Yeah, we'll wrap back on with Jim. Well, I just wanted to add to several things we talked about, but the housing in particular, and just this concept of we're planning for where housing can grow or where business and industry will grow. This is a planning exercise. And so the city's not going to directly build all of this housing, maybe work with some affordable housing partners, but largely this will be private entities creating housing or creating new jobs and growth. But the importance of this alternatives process, or really how I think we should be looking at it, is if there's areas in the community to focus housing or to focus jobs or to focus other types of growth, the associated infrastructure, pipes, water, drainage, public facilities and services, police and fire, safety concerns, and equity as well, those are all related to the sort of the spatial arrangement. And so the workbook has some of these prompting questions on, how to grow, where to travel. But we really want to jump into this discussion with you all in the community as well, is thinking about if we grow in certain ways, then what needs to happen as far as, creating an inclusive but a whole city essentially as well. So great discussion, but I just want to sort of piggyback what Charlie was saying is this is very much a planning exercise, but all of these future changes to zoning or specific plans will need to ultimately be consistent with this plan that's created through this process.
Okay, thank you for that, Dan. And just to clarify, the specific plans are, why are those important in terms of actually getting things built?
That is a great question. So specific plans, and this is like the downtown and stationary specific plans or other ones, they are implementation documents of the city's general plan. They include new zoning, design guidelines and standards, but also other incentives for certain areas on how to encourage different businesses or streetscape improvements, park improvements, those kinds of things. So the specific plans get into greater detail on how different change will occur, where the general plan sets that framework in place, and that policy and vision in place.
Great, thank you, Dan. Let's get to another question or a follow-up. Annette, did you have a question here? Go ahead, please.
I think Jen Close she had her hand raised. She could ask her first.
Yield for, okay, go ahead, Jen. I don't see her. There she
Thank
goes.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Hi, Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, two things, and I do appreciate some additional work on this, but two things is, number one, we talked, I think Yvette talked about reports coming out that were relevant, the portrait and also Youth Truth. And I would be remiss to not mention that if you haven't seen the report that we released last week, that's the state of housing in Sonoma County, that's a comprehensive look at state of housing in Sonoma County, I'd suggest that you do, and you can find it on our website.
From Generation Housing. Okay, great. Mm-hmm.
And so that, and the other thing is that one of the things that I feel like needs a whole lot more attention really is the equity comparison. Yeah, I think we need a real deep dive into that, and that's all.
What are you suggesting? I mean, give us a little bit more, please.
Well, I mean, I don't think, with respect to, if we're talking about a definition of equity and what that means, or what we mean by equity, just sort of one statement on each alternative, that it reduces costs for residents, just sort of in general, to access daily needs. It's just like that's just one example. That doesn't really get to equity. Like right now we have inequities that we need to address, many different kinds of inequities. And so obviously there's going to be many different impacts of the different ways in which we distribute housing and investment. And they're going to impact people in different ways, That's the whole, that's the whole crux of the equity discussion. And so I don't think we can talk about equity without saying which residents And also without having a little bit more detail to that discussion. So that I think is probably one of the most important discussions we can have. And should be, a deep dive into that.
So it's similar to what Ryan's suggesting from the economic standpoint, in terms of what the sort of impacts on development might be on economic development. You're suggesting the same type of sort of help us make the leap into the impacts on specific residents or specific areas.
Absolutely. And to the, like, for example, right now, our city is significantly segregated by race and ethnicity. And it also, our schools are similarly, because of our housing segregation, are also similarly segregated. And that has an impact on that system. So, how do these different, that's just one example, how do these different kinds of alternatives impact that?
Sure. And from your, sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah. So one of the things I was going to say, and equity is a very, very difficult issue in many ways, and I think one important thing to think about is the map and development, and the style of development is just one piece of that. Whatever the so-called preferred alternative is that informs the general plan turns out to be, policies and actions will be the key, right? So you could end up with a more concentrated or more distributed pattern, or some combination that we haven't even thought of yet, that's going to come from our discussions here and with the community. But in any scenario, we're going to have to be looking very carefully at what makes equity. And one of the things that really hit me hard is when we were on a tour of the community, we went to the parks in Roseland. I really had thought before this discussion was really well designed. It was a good investment in a great place. And we've heard from the community, there's a lot of things wrong with it. Not enough shade, not the features in the right place, et cetera. And so going back to some of the initial conversations and discussions we had about where there are sidewalk gaps, like around Roseland High School, there's not sidewalks, and there's plenty of space to walk in the street, but who wants to walk there? And it's not just a health issue because there's no shade and it'll rain on you, or it's too hot. It's more like, why hasn't that investment been made? And so I think no matter what the map looks like, and no matter what zoning rules look like, the policies and actions in the plan have to be prioritized for equity. And so as we think about what the landscape looks like physically in Santa Rosa, and that might change between these discussions and what becomes the so-called preferred alternative, we cannot lose sight of, no matter what it is, we're still going to have these issues we have to deal with. And some of the near term, 0 to 2 year priorities when this plan is adopted, regardless of any specific plan or any implementation, have to be, here's how we're going to deal with giving people opportunities to be included, to gather in places where they haven't been able to make sure every neighborhood has those places, to make sure every neighborhood has access to the same level and quality of services, education, parks, water and sewer, et cetera. And so that just permeates everything we're doing. And so I would challenge us, as we think about what we want the community to look and feel like from a pedestrian or wheelchair or bus riding standpoint, that's only one piece of it. The bigger piece probably is, how do we make sure that people don't get left behind and end up in a place where even if the neighborhood gentrifies or beautifies, around them, they still aren't getting the services they need. So I think let's think about we're jumping ahead a little bit, but that's okay, I think. But let's think about what the policies are. It shall be the policy of the city to focus on these things. And then what's the action? How do we make that happen? How do we make sure people are included and served well?
Thank you for that, Charlie. Jen, anything else?
No, that's it. And I really appreciate those comments, and that's absolutely right. And I think my point is that we have to be thinking about equity sort of at every stage, at every level, and be making informed decisions. And we all need to know what the different potential impacts can be, and what the starting point is with respect to equity, and how the how the current state of the city has impacted and driven some of the inequities, so that we can start to reverse. So, but I really appreciate those comments, and thank you.
Noted. Thank you so much. All right, moving back. Annette, did you have another question?
I have two questions. I'm wondering if in the research you guys have done, have you seen any of these specific alternatives working well somewhere, and for what reasons? And the second question relates to equity. Like, I'm looking at the alternative number 3, where there's or alternative 1, where everything's downtown. that means that people who are homeless or whatnot are going to have to be located downtown because they're not going to be able to get to resources if they're elsewhere. And that isn't equitable if everybody is in one place. So I think we need and have an opportunity here to look at options to spread out like homeless camps throughout the city, not just in one neighborhood. And we need to be fair to everybody in the city, not just the rich people. And I think this is our opportunity to be able to think about that and make placements for people in every neighborhood, regardless of the NIMBY attitude.
Great. So the first question, the second one was a comment. I think the first question was really about, have we seen this type of have we seen these types of alternatives? I don't know that we can say specifically the same way, but Dan, you've done a million general plans by this point.
I'm not sure that many, but it's a good question. And, you know, there's not a bias one way or the other. I mean, from my perspective as a consultant, but I will say each of these alternatives is based on realistic factors. So it's based on the community's vision, but also some of these growth numbers, but also physical constraints, you know, community needs, areas that have vacant or available land as well. So they are ground truth. Each is realistic. But communities throughout California grow in many different ways. So being realistic or achievable is one thing. Growing towards the vision of where you want the city to go or to become is a different thing. So I won't pick or choose any of the three, but I will say, you know, they are based in realistic assumptions of what could happen over the next 5, 10, 20 years, depending on policy choices.
Great. Thanks for that answer, Dan. All right, moving on. Let's see. We're at 7 o'clock. We have still an hour, so we have plenty of time to converse, but I do want to make sure that we get through, you know, everybody has a chance to speak. So Delashay, go ahead, please.
Recently, I went to Puerto Rico, and one of the things that I noticed in Puerto Rico is that all of the signs, well, I'm going to say all of them, but a very big percentage of the signs was geared to so many people, meaning, yeah, it says para, it says stop, but it also says it in French and it says it in all kind of different languages. The wayward signs were for in different, even some of them were even in sign language. And it just seems like what I notice about Santa Rosa is that it's not very welcoming. And it's because we are so segregated, and those were like the perfect word to use. And it's not welcoming. I mean, I was sitting in downtown square and I didn't see welcome anywhere. You know, it just didn't feel, it doesn't feel welcoming. And then if you do see a welcoming sign, it's not welcome to everybody. There's not much diversity. And so we have such a big population of Hispanic people, you know, so I can see saying hola and hello, bienvenidos, but there's more. There's way more different people. And so it just would be nice if there was more, if we worked more on welcoming and, you know, focus a little bit more on wayward signs. I've been here forever, and sometimes I even find myself a little lost. So even a bit more direction as to we are a tourist city. People are coming more and more and more to Santa Rosa to go to like to the wineries and whatnot. And it's just like, if you're not from Santa Rosa and you don't know Santa Rosa, you can get pretty lost pretty quick in little Santa Rosa, because there's not a lot of signage. So that was one of the things I noticed. And the next thing is just today, in the last 2.5 years that I've been sitting as president at SRJC, today marks the 11th teen that has had to go way out of state to get some mental health services. And I mean, I'm talking about way to Wisconsin, because there isn't any mental health services for teens in this area. And teens are very, very affected with mental health now more than ever, especially with the COVID and being remote and different things. And so working more on mental health for everyone, but specializing on them gaps that we're dropping the ball with our citizens here.
Mm-hmm.
And then last but not least, so I can give more people a chance to speak, is a Black community center. It's really sad for me to drive around town and see all these different community centers. I understand that we are less than 2%, but we're here. And we deserve to be not just even heard, but seen and uplifted. So I'm gonna throw those things at you guys.
Thank you for your comments, Delashay. I think you probably went to San Juan, beautiful city in Puerto Rico, and I understand what you're saying. The kind of feeling of being welcoming of visitors. I think for the purpose of the general plan, it might imply something about what our downtown looks like, right? That's the connection I'm making. With mental health, I think somebody alluded to that as well. In terms of where it's located, I think that might have been Annette, of where it's located, if it's far out or if it's in the downtown core, how are people going to access services, really? So I think your discussion, I'm trying to tie it to the spatial issue here that we're trying to deal with. Annie, I see that your hand is up, but I do want to make sure to get to other people that haven't spoken yet, if you don't mind. Beatriz, did you have a response, please?
Yeah, I had a response to Delicious comment, because there is a railroad square wayfinding project happening right now in downtown. Just to let her know that actually translation, Delicious is one of the things that we are requiring, but also many other things related to ADA, so people can actually pass through the spaces that are provided with the signage. And there is actually a board that is talking about this topics together with the businesses. And we're also talking about providing grants to BIPOC businesses that can't afford get their own signage, because it's not only for wayfinding, but also to help businesses get their own guide tourists to get to where they are. So it's both city and businesses too. This was just an interruption to respond to Delicious, but I think this should also be a more welcoming situation for the whole city. And I totally agree with you, and thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you. Andrea, go ahead, please. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that one of the ideas that came up when we were going through the initial development of the alternatives was that this alternative 2 that has the distributed nodes where you have different community centers throughout each neighborhood, that would be really conducive to supporting different, so all of those different neighborhoods having their own community center, community space. And so in response to your last idea there, that might be an alternative for at least that reason, that might appeal to you more, that having that kind of distribution of different concentrations would support those kinds of gathering spaces, both for the immediate communities that are living right around those areas, in addition to community spaces for specific segments of the population, not necessarily geographic based.
Great, thank you for that. I think, Andrea, your comment made me think that both Ryan and Jen's comments about making the linkages more kind of clear, right? Like what you just did, you made a very clear linkage. This alternative 2 that I think you mentioned is going to facilitate more of that kind of discussion about community-based neighborhood centers, for instance. So I see that trend kind of emerging, if you will. Let's see, let's get to the next person here. Joel, go ahead, please. You're on mute. Yeah, there you go. Hi, Joel.
I was just wondering, in the second and third alternatives, is downtown development and near downtown new housing, is it being limited by height limits? I'm just trying to understand, the alternatives workbook, states that every alternative will generate the same amount of housing, which, I kind of, I don't know, it seems, I understand that in theory, housing could be if every home in the city has an accessory dwelling unit, maybe then you could get the same amount of housing as if, you had a lot of new downtown development. But I'm just, I guess I find that a little bit, I don't know. It seems, for me, the amount of new housing that's generated is one of the most important things. Obviously we have a huge need for more housing, and that's just, I guess, kind of confused me that each one generates the same amount of new housing. And I guess I'm wondering, if in the second and third alternatives, is there not, are there height limits downtown? What's the kind of, the actual policy implications of that?
What are the development parameters around downtown that limit really growth? I mean, can we really explode that and get high rises more so than I think currently allowed? Andrea, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so that's a great question. The city did just spend a lot of effort and got a lot of community input on this downtown station area specific plan that was recently completed. And each of these alternatives would still work to implement that. So a lot of the growth that happens in the downtown in all three of the alternatives stems from what was planned for in that recently approved plan. So it's not like we would be drastically limiting what's happening in the downtown. There are really more subtle shifts that happen. So even in alternative 3, we highlight those housing opportunity sites, as that's where I think it's approximately 10% of the new development in that alternative would happen in these scattered sites. And those are essentially parcels that are currently underutilized. And so they have the capacity for some extra growth, but you're still going to see development in the downtown. I do want to clarify that these aren't saying that the same number of units would be generated. The idea is that in each of these 3 alternatives, the same number of units are accommodated by the land uses. So kind of similar to this idea with the regional housing plan and what the housing element has to do. These are units that we are planning for. It doesn't mean that those will actually be developed. And so, kind of back to Ryan's first question about, well, what are the differences with these alternatives? Is there more likelihood that development is going to occur in one scenario versus another? Yeah, you say the same amount of housing units are planned for, but probably you may see that it's more likely that development would occur in alternatives probably 1 and 2 to the fuller extent, because you start to see housing being pretty expensive to develop when you get to like higher rises. Anything above, I think it's 3 or 4 stories, is going to require different development requirements. It becomes very expensive to build those higher rise units. And so it's more feasible that you'd be able to develop probably in that alternative 2 scenario versus alternative 1. So yeah, there are lots of good questions. It's all kind of dependent, but yeah, I hope that at least answered your question about the distinctions there between the 3 as far as downtown is concerned.
Great, thank you for that. Let me go back, and I know I said I'd come back to Annie. So Annie, did you have another follow-up question here?
I did, and actually it's kind of for Jen. So I understand what you were saying about making each area equitable. Okay. I just wanted to see if Jen had another viewpoint on that. If she's coming from a different angle, I understand that she's, from generation housing, and if there's something else that we should be looking at in that capacity.
Jen, do you want to take a crack at that response? Oh, you're here. I will.
Sorry, I'm on my iPad and it's.
Yep, I know how it goes.
It's not that easy. Well, I don't know. My position is that we should be just, in keeping with our vision and that we should be trying to advance our equity goals, that we should be trying to improve, equity in our city. And which is the same as generation housing. What I was saying, and maybe my comment was misunderstood, was that's a conversation we need to be having as we're looking at these alternatives, or what are the impacts with respect to trying to resolve existing inequities and create a more equitable community. So that's the position, and that whether we're talking about homelessness and where we locate them, where we're talking about desegregation, whether we're talking about creating more transit options for folks who might not be able to afford a car, whatever we're talking about, it's a different conversation, in each different context. So that, I don't know if that helps to answer, but I have a follow-up question to what Joel was asking.
Let me come back to you, Jen. I think your point is clear, though, as far as applying the equity lens. Really, what we try to say now is equity LASIK, right? It's done. It's forever. We're always thinking about it. We're always looking at it. Delachey, go ahead, please.
Once again, in my position in dealing with students, one of the good things that we have is, of course, free buses. The students are able to take free buses. They can go to Petaluma, they can go where and take their free buses. But these same students graduate and move on and then lose that resource. And I talk to many people in the community, even homeless people who are just bad luck right now, trying to get back on their feet and things. And so I think providing free buses for all of Sonoma County, for everyone. I know that we have some funds coming in from different areas like PG&E and whatnot. And I think funding should go to that transportation and provide free buses for the whole county. And I think that's a big one. And I think that will help a lot of people get on their feet.
That would be a great goal. Thank you for that, Delachey. Go ahead, Jen. I'm trying to recall the sequence. Go ahead, Jen.
Thanks. And I will, in terms of like the whole equity lens thing is, we talk about equity lenses all the time, or have been for years. And I think it's like time that we shift both that conversation and our goals there, is that we should be just at every conversation, we should be saying, well, how can we do equity here? Right? What's the action we can take? Not just let's look at it from an equity lens, but we do have to start with looking at it from the equity lens. But I think we need to be a little more action oriented. But my follow-up question that follows up to something that Joel said is that, and I think it's a really good one, is in the different alternatives, who are we counting on to build what housing, and how are they incentivized to do that? Like if in alternative 3, for example, if there's a heavy emphasis on ADUs, well, right now the city and state have done a pretty awesome job making it a pretty smooth path to building an ADU if you want to, if you can afford it, and if your space allows, right? So, but that's counting on a homeowner to want to do it, to be able to do it, and then to actually do it. And so there's certainly no guarantee to do that. There might be folks who are more self-motivated to develop a missing middle housing project in alternative 2, or how are we incentivizing folks? And I know that comes down to policy, but is it possible to reach the goals that we say? Because I appreciate going back to Amy's conversation around RENA, is that it's one thing to plan for units, it's another thing to get them built. So look, can we talk about the reality?
Incentives. The incentives.
It's an interesting question, because it also gets back to what is equity. When we first were looking at these different alternatives and thinking about how they're different from each other, and you look at the distributed housing, there are people who are like, oh, that's just like, business as usual. It's not really much of a change. And it's not really true. And especially now with SB 9, Senate Bill 9, which now basically allows anybody who's got more than 2,400 square feet in their lot and can, for reasons of topography and setbacks, carve out another lot, you can just go do it. And one of the interesting things that I see in places like Richmond and San Pablo and Salinas is this is a real equity measure, because people who have been trapped on their property by Proposition 13 as long as since 1978 now have this huge investment they never had before. And if they've got the right size lot, and it doesn't have to be 2,400, it could be 4,000 square feet, whatever, they now can carve it into a second lot, and they can build a new house, and they can rent it or sell it and depending on what the city's requirements are, they could, use it as a vacation rental or whatever. And so one of the interesting things about that alternative 3 idea, and again, I really want to be really serious about, there is no such thing after the next community discussion as alternative 1, alternative 2, or 3. These are ideas to start from, and we will end up with something very different based on your input and the community's input. But interesting thing about what alternative 3 looks like now is if you're in a neighborhood where you haven't been able to either buy or build, either do what a lot of people have done when they've felt trapped by California property taxes and built a second story or built a second unit or whatever. Now you have this whole new source of income, this whole new source of equity in your property. And in some ways, that's a real equity measure. Like if you look at densely populated neighborhoods where the lots are big enough, this allows somebody to get something that neighborhood never had before, which is double the value out of their lot. And you guys may know that statewide cities are kind of grappling with this because if you look at the combination of the accessory dwelling unit law and Senate Bill 9, it's potentially 6 units where there was 1. And so, one of the rules in planning is don't tell me what to do, but I know what's best for my neighbor. And I definitely don't want my neighbor to build 6 units, even if I think it's a good idea for me. And so a lot of the advice around the Bay Area is cities can limit it basically to 4 units, right? So you can have, there's nothing a city can do to tell you can't have your home, the accessory dwelling unit that can be separated and the junior ADU inside, but you can limit if there's a mothering parcel and a daughter parcel, the daughter parcel doesn't have to have those 3. My only point here is this gets to the thing we were talking about before, where this is an equity issue. It's just as much a stretch sometimes for a developer of large format buildings. I mean, the downtown specific plan analyzes what could happen on a parcel that's got 8.0 floor area ratio and is going to be largely housing. And it's like a 15-story building. And it's just as hard from a financial standpoint for a developer who's got experience doing that. As Andrea said, using, type 3 construction, which is, more than 5 stories of stick built on top of a 2-story concrete podium. It's just as hard to get that to pencil as it is for you or me in our house to go out and look at that other 1,200 square feet we have of lot and think, gosh, could I actually pay for and build a unit? I'm sitting in my accessory dwelling unit that I built during COVID. My wife and I and family. And so I've been through this and I'm very sensitive to it. And so bringing this all back together and making sure I don't dominate the conversation, it really is an interesting perspective for each of us to think about what is the equity involved in having people in more concentrated, larger scale housing so that we can make it more affordable, and compare that to, well, what if I'm able to do that lot by lot in my neighborhood? And do I want to see that? Like, even if it's good for me, do I want to see all my neighbors do that too? What if my neighborhood all of a sudden doesn't have parking on the street anymore because there's so many more of us? But what does that do to the demand for parks and services? Does it help? Because now I've got double the people or 1.5 times the people, and it's going to, increase the school population and increase, the use of parks, et cetera. So again, just putting it out there as this gets to what are the policies we're going to use to make sure we get the outcomes that we want.
Thank you, Charlie. Amy, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate on what Charlie was saying in response to Jen, that we're trying to find all the tools and really mobilize everything we have to be able to get housing in all of these areas and all of these ways. But the way that these alternatives are helping differentiate the options are where we want to incentivize and create infrastructure, the rest of the tools that really build the community, and also, specific plans. Where do we want to facilitate and streamline housing? So this will help kind of guide those decisions as well. We are still going to, do our best to implement the downtown plan and SB 9 and missing middle and all of those things. But this just kind of lays it out in a way where we can look at the rest of the pieces to make sure that we're creating all the tools to create that full community that we're looking for.
Thank you, Amy. Beatriz, just a very quick follow-up. I know there's still quite a few people that haven't had a chance to jump in, so I just want to encourage us to be tight with our responses, please.
Just a quick addition to what both Amy and Charlie mentioned. I think we're also not alone in this task. I think planning has a big responsibility in the housing part, but there's also the economic development teams and the housing team. And I just want to make you more feel comfortable that we are talking to these other teams in the city. This is not only a planning responsibility, and we also have nonprofit organizations that we're willing to collaborate with. We're also including the community to hear from them to change the policy, and that's why we're in this conversation with you. Just wanted to say that this is a teamwork that doesn't only include the planning department.
Great. Thank you both. Thank you, Charlie, for your response. Yvette, I see your hand, and I'm going to just put you in the queue for the next round of sort of follow-ups, okay? Just want to make sure that I get to other folks that haven't yet spoken. Lee, please go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Well, am I coming out there?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
It's been a great discussion, and I wanted to hear rather than speak, and it's been really great. A couple of things I'll throw out there on the equity discussion, just so people have it in their consciousness. There are discussions going on initiated by me when I was on the Black Chamber, and now as an individual, I've got interest in building a Bipark museum. The Black Chamber was thinking more specifically about a Black museum, but my thought addresses a number of these equity concerns, even to the extent that where schools fall short on teaching and talking about ethnic contributions to places where there's 2% or 5% of certain minorities, a museum of the type that I have imagined, and I grew up in a 2% community of St. Helena, California, but still the wine country. And so at 74 years of age, will be 75 next March, I've seen enough to know that you're not going to be able to squeeze the housing in some parts of the community that have historically resisted certain populations and so forth. So why not? And it doesn't have to be Santa Rosa. Our thinking is not just Santa Rosa. Our thinking is the North Bay for this museum, which would garner, hopefully, more money and more interest, even when we talk to celebrities or whoever. There is a need. And if the schools, when I went to St. Helena, history was not one of my favorite subjects because the only thing that was talked about was slavery. Well, that didn't excite me that much. And there's other aspects of these communities that need to be taught to the younger people coming up so they can appreciate their place in that community and not feel, as someone mentioned, it's not welcoming. We come in here and there's not that sense of, oh boy, we've got more color in here, or more equity in the thought processes at policymaking boards and that kind of thing. So I just want to put that out, that while it may not rise to the level of the master plan, there are discussions going on, and we all know it takes money. And the people did. I've got an architect who's an award-winning architect who's part of this discussion and has already put their company up as an interest in this project. The Black Chamber, when I was on there, we got a virtual museum for the Black Chamber on record now, on paper. And so it's a funding thing locally and for cities or regions that would like to participate. So that's a good discussion. Keep it going and see what we come up with that.
Great. Thank you for your comments, Lee. It's very informative. Andrea, did you have a linkage here to the general plan?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Lee, you touched on an idea that De La Shea and Jen and Gannett and others have tonight regarding existing segregation patterns in the city. And I just wanted to highlight that that's something that isn't touched on with this phase of the alternatives. But getting back to what Charlie said earlier about how we address equity issues and into the policies and the actions that are included in this general plan, in the final plan, that's where the rubber meets the road. And we start to craft policies that address the needs for more diverse economic segments of the community to be mixing together, and requirements for affordable housing and housing that's affordable at all, you know, the naturally affordable and the subsidized housing spread across the whole community. And so that's definitely coming as part of this process and these discussions as well. You don't see it here in this phase because right now we're just focused on, you know, how units are distributed overall, but it will be coming and is something that, you know, the input that we're hearing from all of you, starting with our first community meetings and going through the end, will impact all of that.
Thank you. Okay. Again, Beatriz, I see your hand. I'm gonna just keep moving on. We only have half an hour and we'll come back. Okay. So Steve, go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you. A comment on the alternatives. There's a wealth of information proven and proven to work. It might be a combination of alternative number 1 and number 2, where we have a central corridor and an outreach into the communities for developments just like TODs that can have jobs close to the neighborhoods, but still have a concentration of downtown development. Although the downtown development would need to reach a certain critical mass where there's enough folks, a variety of folks living in downtown to make it a safe and vibrant location. Either one of these would create jobs in either the neighborhoods or the downtown. Also, the idea that we've learned through mixed use over the last 30, 40 years is having folks at different demographic cohorts living in the same neighborhood doesn't work. A mixed income neighborhood works, as we've seen throughout the United States. And that could be something that we should consider. Additionally, regarding the investment needed to make these things work, there are hundreds of millions of dollars available to Santa Rosa for these types of development projects. And all we need to do is make the phone call. And literally make the call, because Santa Rosa is a place where the institutional investors love to invest. So to invest in mixed income neighborhoods, to enhance the availability and the opportunity for jobs, and to enhance the education of our citizens, because I believe that the more education an individual has, the more opportunities they have in the future. So the money is there. The opportunity is there. Let's look at investing in not only the downtown, but the neighborhoods through transit-oriented developments.
Thank you, Steve. Well said. Kevin, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I appreciate this discussion, friends. I think a decent amount of my questions have already been answered, but I'll try to get it into 2. I'll just prep the first one with, I appreciate Charlie saying there's no such thing as alternative 1, 2, and 3. I found myself a bit down a rabbit hole when I was looking at alternative 1 only showing bus rapid transit when any future alternative should have bus rapid transit, let's be honest. And then alternative 3 mentioned that private automobile use would go up, which and that can't happen if we have any future climate. The automobile cannot be as dominated. So I appreciate that we're going to be able to pick and choose. But I think that the deeper question here for me and for us together here is, what does the public need to engage with these alternatives? And so when I'm looking at it, something that comes up right away, and I might be still, so I apologize if you guys are going to go over this, but I just want to get it out. Can't ever assume anything. What neighborhood am I in? Where would my neighborhood Main Street be? Andrea mentioned each neighborhood has its own community places. And so I think you guys have probably done this already, and other groups within City of Santa Rosa have, and that is basic asset mapping. Where are those places that are currently working, and how will those places be positively or negatively impacted by each alternative? And that could be a lot of different things. It could be bus routes, it could be fire stations, it could be schools, it could be recreation areas, mini malls, restaurants, whatever it is that you determine, churches, etc., parks. So asset mapping, is that being done? Will that be, the first question, will that be something that the public can engage with? So current assets versus how they will be affected by an alternative. And then the second question is really quickly, a couple places in the alternative workbook, it mentioned there will be policies and programs in the future. And I think Jen and many others have spoken, Delashay, to equity. But one of the things I think about are sometimes it's hard to be able to get into what some of those are that create walkable communities. And so is there ways, when I think about it, and Steve was mentioning transit-oriented development, but traditional neighborhoods is another way I've heard it framed. There are certain policies that can help that regardless of which alternatives are there. And I think that's a big one. I work with youth, and all of them, and I say all of them, want to be able to walk to services. They want to be able to walk to school. They want to be able to hang out with friends in places that they don't have to spend a bunch of money to do it. So what are those policies look like? And will this planning together, will we be able to get into the nuances of what those policies will look like? Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Kevin. Andrea or Dan, in terms of asset mapping, I know that is something that we are focusing on, but do you have any response quickly to that specific suggestion?
Well, it's a really great suggestion. And we have a ton of data just on physical attributes, but also our first survey, or I guess that was our first survey. We asked the community to do some asset mapping in the heart of their neighborhood and sort of neighborhood boundaries. So we have that data as well. And actually it's a tremendous amount of data. So really good point. I think we can go back around and sort of narrate that or pull that data back up as part of this process. But thanks for mentioning that. And I do want to just really mention, Kevin, you hit on the key thing of all of this is how are we conveying and discussing this with the community as well.
Absolutely.
So that's a key piece of the feedback we want to hear from CAC. So thanks.
Absolutely.
I know we've heard from others as well.
Thank you. Omar, let's go to Omar here. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I think the one thing that I like these, where we're going with the conversation, I think one of the things that I thought of just where I live is Hearn Avenue. Based on what I'm looking at the maps, it looks like it'll be part of a main corridor regardless of the plan. And I know there is some traffic issues as it exists with the Hearn overpass. I live 5 minutes from work, and sometimes with traffic it can take me 20 minutes to get there. And obviously, as using as a main corridor going forward, that traffic may stay consistent, may increase. There are a lot of things like that. So not just looking in this area specifically, but knowing from my personal experience with it, have we looked at potential traffic impacts of the main corridors or main travel areas that we're looking at, and what policies we'll need to input to address those issues?
Mm-hmm. So it's again going back to the same kind of situation, is like what is the impact on each of these alternatives, whether it's economic development, social services. Now you mentioned transportation, we talked about identity. All of these things sort of need to be spelled out a little bit more strongly. Let's see, any other comments, Omar? No? Okay. Let's keep going. All right, so then let's see. I do have, who hasn't spoken yet? Rituja. Oh, caught you off guard there. Sorry about that.
Don't worry, I was listening. And I want to thank everyone for sharing such insightful comments. It's really great to hear everyone's perspectives. And sometimes I feel a little bit disconnected because I currently don't live in Santa Rosa and I don't work in Santa Rosa right now. And so it's been great to hear like all of your opinions. If I could ask one question, it would just be some general questions about the equity priorities plan. I was wondering if you guys had thought of any ways to kind of measure improvements in that area throughout this process, and also if you could talk more about like what specific data would you be collecting from each of the priority communities?
Okay, thank you for your question, Rituja. I'm going to go to Beatriz since I cut her off earlier, but I want to just encourage everybody, you know, we really only have about 20 minutes. I want to be respectful of people's time. So we may not be able to answer all of your questions, but we are noting them and we'll be able to get to them at some point. Beatriz, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Noe. And thank you, Rituja, for the question. First, I think we're working on outreach and quantifying how many people will speak and what are the characteristics of people. But I think our next step with this would be how are we measuring specifically in terms of policy, the gaps that we are talking about, like sidewalks and bike lanes being one of the very first things that we can actually verify. And we're trying to work with the transportation team to do like an inventory of the things that we're missing in terms of community assets, not assets specifically, community, oh, I forgot the word, I'm so sorry. Well, infrastructure, that's what I wanted to say, I'm sorry. And based on that, I think we should start to talk about investment. And this is something that is not on our side, but I think that just providing the information to the rest of the departments in the city and also to the city council can start a conversation about how we invest money in this specific community. So I think this, we would leave it to the community and city council. We're just putting everything there in terms of how we want housing and infrastructure, as well as community engagement to happen on the side of planning. But I think this should be a conversation that the whole city should be focusing on.
Thank you, Beatriz. Thank you, Tuja, for that question. Let's see, keep it going to here to, I believe, Michael Cook. Have you had a chance yet?
No, I haven't, but I'm just listening. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Erica, did you have a chance? Did you want to say anything? I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance here.
Yeah, good evening. I haven't spoken yet. The thing that just came to mind for me as a civil engineer was just thinking about asset management. And I'd be curious how the city's asset management department is being funded, or because I know there was a bunch of people that left recently. So I'm just curious the prioritization of looking at asset management.
So Erica, school us a little bit. Not all of us are familiar with asset management.
What is asset management? Yeah. Sure. So when I think of asset management, it's kind of like collecting a database of what the city has in terms of assets, be it parks, be it infrastructure like roads, water, sewer. It's just massive amounts of data in a GIS kind of a format. So I don't know, I'd just be curious how the city's asset management department is looking and how it can contribute to this plan.
And this is a little different from what I think Kevin was suggesting about asset mapping. Asset is community asset mapping that I think Kevin was suggesting, which was more about the, neighborhood types of amenities and, things that are community serving. I think what Erica, I know what Erica is talking about is asset owned by the city, right? So this would be the roads, the street lights, the sewer systems, the community buildings, any kind of infrastructure that is owned by the city and how it manages it. And I think the follow-up question, Dan, is how this relates to the general plan.
Yep. And I'll let staff talk about the asset management team, because that I'm less familiar with. But a really key part of this, as we were talking about earlier, is the infrastructure and the traffic and the systems, but also the services the city provides as well, and how fire access, police, all those things get factored into this. So a few key ways this very directly gets into our process that we're discussing right now. The alternative is a little bit intentionally a higher level analysis. Our next phase, when we start getting a preferred alternative, is looking at a lot of this in much more detail, because we'll have more specificity when we hear comments back from the community. And then we can dive into a lot of some of the analysis on how different infrastructure could be impacted, good or bad, around these alternatives. But also worth noting for the community as well as listening, we have a technical advisory committee as part of this process, and that is department heads and technical experts in all departments. So they've also been helping in the analysis, but developing some of these alternatives and factors as well. So all departments of staff are very involved in this project.
Great. Thank you for that, Dan. I also want to encourage you, Dan, to show the fabulous mural that you and Sasha have been working on while we continue on with the discussion. This is basically just to let you know that we've been in the background, taking notes, copious notes, and also trying to organize them to some extent. James, I see that you came back. Thank you for coming back. I apologize, I missed you there. If you have a comment about the alternatives, about really what the presentation or the workbook that you, well, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, James.
Well, thank you. Yes, no, I've missed here. I had to take care of something.
No problem.
I'm gone for a while, but when you were, you reached a point in the meeting. I think Ryan had asked a question about the alternatives that we had just reviewed, and I think he framed the question in terms of trade-offs between the alternatives, and then staff jumped in and made some comments that was heading toward a response to my question, which was similar, only rather than framing the question in terms of trade-offs, as I reviewed the alternatives, I thought, what are mutually exclusive between the alternatives? And I actually couldn't find anything. I was thinking that if you were leaning toward option 1, what would that preclude from option 2 or 3? And I thought maybe nothing that you were concerned about, because I found something attractive in each of them.
Right.
So I thought, since the options aren't really mutually exclusive, there is hopefully a fourth option that maybe takes the best of all three. I don't know. That's sort of what I was leaning toward. And as staff responded to the question the way Ryan had framed it in terms of trade-offs, I see that there is that possibility.
Right.
And I thought that was encouraging. That was, I was going to just urge that we have a discussion around what that might look like. And I'm assuming that you have while I've been gone. So I'm sorry for
no. In fact, it's a good way to wrap up the conversation, James, because what happened after Ryan's comment is that we did get into, I asked, kind of knowing the answer, but I asked, what do we have to pick one? And the answer is that no, we don't have to pick one, right? The whole point of this is that this is just a starting point of a discussion to get us talking about which one. But in fact, the reality is, the likelihood is that the fourth one that you're talking about is going to be sort of picking between the three, right? Picking, I like this from this one, I like this from that one, and so it's going to end up shaping into something that is new, something that is not one of these three currently. It might look like one of them, but it's not going to be exactly the same. So I think you are right on in terms of your assessment of where this is headed.
Thank you.
All right. So Yvette, thank you so much for waiting so patiently. You can see that I was trying to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk. So thank you for waiting. What is your comment or your question?
There's also an attendee that wanted to speak as well. And I just wanted to say that it's very important that we really look at the impacts of this type of housing. I live between Roseland and downtown, and in some there are days it's just like, why even bother going out my house? And so, so I really want to make sure that we're looking at the impacts as far as resources. And, right now we're in a drought, what kind of impact that's going to have on, building up, building out, whatever that may be. And then safety, as far as walking and bicycling. I don't bicycle around here because it's just dangerous. And so, and then the key thing of the whole thing about mapping segregation, I think that's very important, that we should probably invest into doing that mapping process and really taking a look to see if we're having those issues here, which we are. And then the asset mapping and the asset management, I was going to also touch on that and say, you know, we have a little bit of that when we're dealing with our parks and recs and trying to deal with the quadrants and everything like that, and see what we have in our area, what we don't have. And there's a lot of movement that's happening here in the Roseland area, off of Hearn, with the big complex that's coming. But I think it's very important that everybody is aware of what we have coming to our area. As we're looking at these models, there are some things that's on the horizon. And so it's going to change. To me, it's going to change what we're looking at, because those things are in the forefront and they're very near in the future, you know, coming to fruition.
Great. Thank you for your comments, Yvette. Thank you again for your patience. I'm going to, let's see, move us on. I think everybody had a chance to speak here. Dan, if we could pull up the presentation and bring us home here in terms of the next section.
Yeah, thanks, Noe. And thanks to Sasha and others recording all these comments on the mural whiteboard, which has been great. And we're making sure everything is recorded here. Of course, this session's also recorded video as well, so it'll be available on the website. I just want to hit on a few things, just to update where we left off at our last session. This slide that we presented last time really includes a slew of engagement activities that we're going to launch into in February and March, and maybe a little bit early April with Planning Commission study sessions as well. As we discussed last time, there's a lot of different methods for engaging the community, a lot of different options. We want to be very proactive about this, in particular the equity priority communities in those sessions, and really reaching out to groups, organizations, and individuals that Beatrice and the team have already identified. So this is just kind of a big picture snapshot to say there's going to be a lot of community discussions like this over the next few months. And as part of that, similar to last time, but we want to sort of ramp this up a little bit more and get more support to CAC members. We are currently developing sort of the questionnaire and the survey tools and the materials for this round of engagement on the alternatives. But as part of that, a CAC toolkit. And what we mean by that is a series of materials and information to give updates to meetings if you're meeting with certain groups or organizations that you're tied to, or if you want to run a mini workshop. We want to have some training sessions in February. So this is just a heads up. Beatrice and the team will help organize that. But I also want to mention, we're also here to support you. So it's not giving you materials and you know, good luck kind of a thing. The team is here to support. We can be running logistics during Zoom meetings, those kinds of things. So more to come, and Beatrice and I and others will get back with you. But did want to mention, as liaisons to the community in your role in the CAC, we'd love for you really, again, to get the word out and help us, most importantly, help us get voices and comments and opinions back from the community as well as we go through this.
Thank you, Dan. So really here, the question for you all is, you know, how do we envision, I mean, well, I guess, first of all, any thoughts, any feedback on the upcoming community engagement process that you've seen so far, and really importantly, your role in reaching out to the community and opinion input. Do you all have any thoughts, any questions for us on this engagement piece? This one I won't call on people. I just want to make sure this one's a little bit, go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you. Do you mind going back to the slide?
Sure.
Where, thank you.
This one or
this one?
The engagement? Yep.
Yeah. So I think what I would like to see, and what I would like for the team to, and any of us who will really be supporting community engagement activities, is to think about the ways in which we can make these activities culturally responsive. There were some pretty awesome things that I saw consultants do for engaging folks. I think it was for I don't remember if it was for the census or if it was for a different process that we went through recently. But they did something like tacos and mapping or something. Like they went to spaces where folks who are typically not engaged in these processes spend time, and provided food and resources, and really walked them through the process of providing feedback. I think we have to think about the fact that a lot of folks haven't been engaged at all in this conversation. And so it's not going to be just a matter of like, give us your feedback. There's going to be some legwork to help people feel comfortable and feel like they are able to give us their authentic feedback. So I think my comment is really just around the cultural responsiveness.
Absolutely. Tacos and planning sounds right up my speed. I'll tell you that right now. So that's great. Thank you for your suggestion. Any other comments? I think I saw somebody else pull their hand up. Thoughts on feedback on your role? We do want to encourage you to reach out to your different constituents, your different networks. And maybe this is something that we continue the discussion on, but we will be reaching out and trying to organize. I think we have, Beatriz, go ahead. You have like 40 different, events already kind of planned. So tell us a little bit more about that.
And I don't want to talk about this because I want to give this time to the CAC. I just wanted to say that for the people who do not want to help us organize workshops, we're also able to organize the workshop on the city side and just if you help us connect with the community, that's way enough work. We will do this as much as we can and as much as our capacity permits us, and as long as we have hours in the day to do it, we'll be trying to do it every effort that we can do to provide you with staff, myself, and spaces for doing this. Just please contact me and I'll talk to you directly. I have talked to some of you separately based on conversations to organize workshops. But if you feel like you want to organize something specifically for a community that you have connection with, please just reach out to us.
Thank you for that, Beatriz. It's important, yes, to connect, to use you as a trusted resource, as a trusted connection. Steve, go ahead, please.
Yes, I suggest we focus on the equity and the capital resources and the political capital necessary to make it happen.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Steve. All right, so let's move on. We still need to do a little bit of public comment. So I'll pass it back to Michelle, and go ahead, please.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so now is the time for public comment. You will see a timer appear that will give you 3 minutes. And if you could start by stating your name for the record, please. Give me just one moment while I share my screen. Okay.
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Michael, you should have a prompt allowing you to unmute yourself.
Oh. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead,
We
please.
can hear you. If you can start by stating your name for the record, please.
Oh, Michael Toski. Sorry, I was so worried that you guys were like intentionally trying to neglect me, like I wasn't wanted at the meeting or something. And yeah, and the city of Santa Rosa just didn't contact me to tell me to please don't come to future meetings. So that really made me paranoid and frustrated. So I'm sorry about that. But in the future, please be more considerate than that. But anyway, what I was going to say, what I wanted to say tonight was, besides, like I said last month at the last meeting about for there to be more drive-through establishments, like more quick serve restaurants with drive-throughs, and more pharmacies with drive-throughs, and more banks with drive-through ATMs, for more improvements to the Santa Rosa East area, especially of the Highway 12 by extension east of Farmers Lane through the Southeast Greenway does not never really does happen. Then there really needs to be improvements to the existing roadway network there. Like I was thinking of Highway 12 between Los Alamos, at least between Los Alamos Road and Pippian Road, to be widened to 2 lanes in each direction as it currently ends south of Los Alamos Road, where it stops being a 4-lane roadway, and that Caltrans really needs to relinquish the rest of the Caltrans owned traffic signals to the city of Santa Rosa within Santa Rosa city limits that the city of Santa Rosa does not already maintain on Caltrans's behalf of the Caltrans owned traffic signals, like the Caltrans owned traffic signals on Sonoma Highway. Speaking of Highway 12 and on Farmers Lane between Hone Frontage Road and Vallejo Street, and just the other traffic signals, the Caltrans owned traffic signals throughout Santa Rosa city limits that the city of Santa Rosa does not already maintain. So any responses to my comments tonight? Hello?
Hi, Michael. So this is just a time to share your feedback with us. And if you have any specific questions that you would like answered, if you can email us, we would be more than happy to respond. But this is just a time for the public to share any feedback or comments or thoughts they have relating to the agenda item tonight.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good night. Thank you for your comment.
All right.
Okay, and that looks like that was our only public comment for this evening.
Okay, thank you so much. Yvette, did you have a final comment here before we kind of close up here?
Yes, I just, I did earlier, I did mention that we had an attendee that had his hand up, and I think we need to give space for the community to have public comment. I don't know if this is just by the way we set it up, but if we're going to allow people to come into the space and have comment, I think we need to pause for a minute and take their comments, because people are leaving the meeting. And if we're going to be advising people to come to this meeting to speak, and then we take up all the time, when are they going to have time to speak? So I think we need to adjust that and maybe have more than one time period within our agenda to have public comment. That's just my comment.
Noted. Thank you for that, Yvette. All right, let's go ahead and bring up the next steps, and see, I'll pass it back to, is it Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Noah. Just real quick on sort of the next steps of moving forward from tonight's meeting. One key thing we're working on right now is a detailed calendar of engagement events, especially the big citywide workshops as well. They're currently being scheduled, but this is something we're going to share with the CAC, but also get posted on the website and have a whole series of notifications, email blasts, hard copy notifications, so we can really get the word out as these meetings are scheduled. As I mentioned earlier, we're also putting together these engagement toolkits or packet of materials, physical or digital, and we're going to be hosting training sessions with CAC members here next month to really go through these materials, so understand how to use them as well. And as always, feel free to check in with us, any questions, or to coordinate any of these activities. We're here to help in any way we can.
Great, thank you for that. I want to thank you for your participation today, again, for your outstanding comments and discussion. It was just fascinating, great discussion. And I would like to invite Amy Lyle out here to just say goodnight to us on behalf of the city. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Noe. Just wanted to thank you as well. You did a great job facilitating tonight and making sure everyone had the opportunity to vocalize their comments and questions. And just really appreciate everyone's involvement, and we'll be getting back to you soon in February next month. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.